people talk about how in the US, you have to like stand up in class and kind of sell yourself in like, you know, when you're like 7.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Carrie, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
How's it going?
It's pretty awesome.
Well,
thanks for the invite.
I appreciate you coming on. Let's start with Cruxy. What do you guys, because I read on the website, pricing, strategy, execution, ton of stuff, but how do you explain Cruxy to the world?
Probably quite badly.
Okay.
I feel like it's something that when you meet people, they always explain their business really badly, and then you're like, oh God, that's me. Not ideal. But anyway, I will try.
Okay.
So I was really frustrated at Mars Incorporated. I hired loads of Bain and McKinsey bods to come in and crack kind of growth questions we had.
So I don't know Mars, but I knew. What kind of consultancy was it?
So it wasn't. It was a consumer goods company. So they own like 60 billion turnover.
Do you mean like Mars bars?
Like literally candy.
Oh.
And when I first
saw like
started,
175,000 associates, and I thought it was like some kind of like consultancy, like a McKinsey or something, or an agency. No, you're talking about Mars, the chocolate bar
company. I might be a better consultant if I'd started in a consultancy.
Well, that's why it made sense. I was like, oh, you left to go do your own thing.
But I think because what I did there was they're very good at like letting you run a business. So I ran a P&L, and in the end, a huge P&L and multitude of teams,
like how big?
etc. So it started about 50 million revenue. Okay. Someone put me in charge
of. Is that like one
She's
brand
amazing.
Or something?
It was one segment of a brand. Yeah. So it was like actually canned Pedigree. Like, would you believe?
Okay.
Literally dog food.
Yeah.
I was that girl.
Okay, but canned Pedigree, meaning somebody else ran other parts of Pedigree, but you just dealt with the canned product?
Yeah, so you have someone doing dry and someone doing treats.
Broke it up. Yeah, dry
yeah,
treats.
I mean, if you want to feed your dog, you've got to talk to a lot of different people. But yeah, so in essence, what I did there was ran a P&L, looked at how are we going to grow the business over the next 3 to 5 years? What are the choices that we need to make for markets, for pricing, for kind of products we need to launch? And I guess I always found it quite frustrating that consultants would come in, ultimately tell the time like using your own watch. So they'd kind of go and do all these interviews, and you kind of say like, yeah, but you already know all of this, and you've just consolidated it into a document, and you know it's very useful, and there's some good Marimekko charts in there, but ultimately, what are we going to now do with this? And I always found doing something with the 200 slides that sits in the drawer is the hard thing about hard things, right? It's the challenge. The challenge is not knowing what you should do. I think, you know, most of us know we should be more choiceful. We should make more kind of strategic decisions, strategies, the art of sacrifice, all these kind of almost Instagram-like quotes that we have written all over our offices. Yeah. But the reality of kind of what are you going to do to execute that, I found frustrating. First client we signed was then in payments. So random, so I just quit. First client we signed was in payments, and I was interviewing the board, kind of like thinking, what do consultants do? And this is Cruxy,
like when you left, that was your first client?
Yeah. Wow. So bought a Mac, you know, apparently consultants have Macs.
That's what you have to have a Mac if you're going to be in tech.
Exactly. It's like the only thing I bought. Then I like sold my sports car, sold loads of shoes on eBay.
Gotta pay for stuff.
Moved into my parents' spare room, like tiny little bed. I was like, oh God, what has happened to my life? Wow. But first client we signed was in payments, and they exited 9 months later to Barclaycard. And it was then that I realized the world of tech and financial technology is intricate and fascinating, and these people are obsessed with their technology, but haven't had the rigor of how do you commercially scale? What are the choices you make? So everything we do is associated to top line growth. So what are the pricing choices you need to make? What's the structure of your pricing? What's the kind of way that you put that together, and how does that drive value? What are the new markets, new segments, and new verticals? Yeah. So everything that you kind of think, everyone I think often has these things on a list of things that they're going to do in 6 months' time, but we all get busy. And therefore, I guess we're a kind of partner, we say like challenging partner to really high growth tech companies. But I don't want us to be seen as the evil consultants that come in and think they're better than everyone, because I think that is a recipe for disaster.
What's your approach to that interaction with a company that makes it different from others that would make you feel that way?
Big question. I mean, you can say all the standard things that anyone else would say, but I guess, gut feel. It just comes down to emotional intelligence. The first book I give everyone when they join is Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Pillar
It's
book.
like, if you look down on people and you think, I'm a consultant, I'm gonna come in and I
Fix
know
everything.
something.
Yeah.
It's like, you're never gonna know the business like they know it. You're like just moving that slightly closer there.
I try to.
I like it.
Jared's happy when I keep the audio good.
It's just, it's right there. And then, so I think you've got to befriend these people. You've got to get to know them. You've got to know their fears. And it might be that someone's hired a consultant because they're literally worried that they want evidence for their boss. But don't look down on that. Like, when you're in a big organization, you do a lot of things for a lot of reasons. And we're really lucky because we work with people who, they're aligned to our ethos. We just don't work with people who want a Deloitte. If you are thinking about choosing McKinsey, and we have won some pitches against them, but you're probably not going to choose a nimble, hungry, really punchy consultancy that's going to tell you the things you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Because you're in some way maybe looking to pacify your board or something. So we try to just become really good friends, get under the skin, really get to know what is the real problem here? Is it as they believe it to be? Or is there something else under the surface?
So, I find it fascinating, the whole like pricing and strategy side. How do you present? Because I know a lot of people watching either have to have a board they report to or on a team and they got to sell something up to the CEO. Like, what's the right way to communicate a strategy and get buy-in? Like, how does that work from your point of view? How do you tell people there's something they don't want to hear? Because when you said that, I was like, shit, how do you keep being a consultancy to the same client if they're not?
Well, we work with a lot of Americans, and I think the British accent softens, it's like, I can get away with a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, one wish of the hair, show the grey streak. Look, I've got some years.
Yeah.
And then kind of bit of British accent banter. No, obviously not that. But I think, what do I think? Everyone says clarity and you need to be really clear, but I also see lots of strategy one pages and strategy houses and all these things that people have obviously sat on a Sunday getting so close to that they think they're very clear. But actually, we usually fall back on, and it's very Simon Sinek, which I know is a bit 2 years old, but why are you actually doing this? What is the purpose of this? Then how are you doing it? What are the choices you're making? And then what do you need to do? So pricing, for example, where is the driver of value in the product? Why does it matter? What do people actually really buy into your product for? How do you then restructure the pricing so that each of those pillars of value really connects with the customer? And then then you need to get into what is the price point? What is the model? Where do we anchor the pricing? How do we compare to the competition? But I think a lot of people still, if you just say to them, forget PowerPoint, just draw on a bit of paper, a diagram that shows what your strategy is, they would never be able to do that.
No. It sounds too simplified.
That is having a strategy. And I still love just asking CEOs that I sit with, and it's usually over a glass of wine because I'm a bit of a wino. And any glass of Montrachet can get you through a gritty conversation. And I usually say to them, but what are you not doing? Because I just think asking people what they're doing, they just tell you all the same things and they tie it together with some generic strategy that they think, we're going to drive this market, we're going to defend this market. Whereas as soon as you say, okay, markets, where are you playing to win? Where are you playing to participate, and where are you not entering? Okay, they'll answer that and it'll be quite clear. But then if you say, okay, talk to me about how your resource aligns against the fact that 80% of your focus is on play to win. Like, is 80% of your sales team's time spent there? And they're like, oh no. So the do not enter markets, say we said do not enter Asia or APAC at this point. And they're like, yeah, but we're doing quite a few calls and we're just understanding the market. And that's what I talk about, the void between strategy and execution. It looks good on a page, but then you sit down and you interview people and they're like, oh, but we don't do that at all.
So they talk it up, but they're actually not following it.
Come on, you know that.
But how do you, like when you're starting Cruxy, how do you apply this stuff for like choosing? Because I mean, consultant, it can be a wide, like starting to work with these tech companies, you can do a lot of things. Obviously you learned a lot at Mars. How did you use that for your own, like deciding what to do in the early days? Or did you do a lot to figure out kind of what the market wanted?
Yeah, I think to be honest, one of the things I'm most gutted by, and like, I mean, it's all learning, right? We're just learning every day. But you say that, you say that publicly on these kind of things, and then secretly inside you're kind of crying, rocking backwards and forwards, being like, why the hell have I done this repeatedly? I think one of the things I'm really gutted by is the fact that I'm like 6 years in, but I feel about a year and a half in terms of learning. And my dad always used to say, you know, you can meet someone who's got 20 years experience, but is it 2 years times 10? They've actually got 2 years experience. And I feel a bit like that because I think I feel like I've got to the bottom of that change cycle as an entrepreneur or CEO, and then kind of looped back and made the same mistakes again. And you look back on each year and you're like, God, I've done that again. Like, God, I really am won over by people in interviews, you know, or whatever your weakness is, I suppose. Yeah. But I think in essence, we've been really focused on just tech. We've been very focused on B2B, gritty technology. And I say that, but I mean
as well.
Fintech, trading platforms. So lots in capital markets, cyber, you know, AI, but AI is nothing, you know, AI applied to something. Yeah. And we would never try and sign a Monzo bank because we'd be like, not for us.
Yeah.
You know, we would go after a trading platform that sells into JP Morgan. Mm-hmm. So I think we have tried to be very focused, and then with what we do, we say no to a lot now, but I wish I had done that in year one. I think in year one, I was just so rabbit in headlights, you know, big company, I earn no money, you know, no salary for a year, 10 grand for the next year, that you kind of just think revenue's revenue, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get like 3 years in and people think you do something and you kind of think, but that's not what I do at all. Like, this is crazy. And you realize it's all your own doing.
Yeah.
Which is really gutting, but all you can do is learn from it.
Well, I seen in an interview you mentioned to take everything you've done in a year, put it on a wall, ask yourself if you're proud of it. If you're not proud of things, you know, ask yourself why you keep pushing those things forward, et cetera. Is that like something that you ask the CEOs you work with or companies you work with to do, or like, is it something you even use for your own life? How does that?
Yeah, I think it's more of a kind of Cruxy thing than it would be for a CEO. I mean, if we're hired to do pricing, we'd obviously try to get under the skin of like what they're doing that they think is right and wrong. And obviously doing that by not just saying, what are you doing that's right and wrong, but by actually intrinsic kind of driving into the motivations of why they do things. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, it's more, sitting back and being able to take a really brutal view of, okay, I talk a good game, but like we were talking about working out before we started, and it's like, you know, you meet all these people, they're like, oh yeah, I'm really trying to get fit, or I'm really trying to lose weight, and then they're kind of sitting there like secret eaters in the corner. And I think that's kind
secret eaters. I love that term.
Who thought we could come up with like a link to secret eaters on this podcast? But I do think that's the void between strategy and execution, because everyone thinks they're being focused, everyone thinks they're being strategic, and then the next thing they know, they're like flying to speak at a conference in Singapore, and they've said APAC's not a focus for them. So I think, I do try to, and I try to do it because I'm quite a kind of bullish character. I think people are probably not as honest, you know, they probably feel a bit intimidated. So I try to make sure that as a team, we sit around and I force people to be like, what are we doing wrong? What should I not be doing? I'm sure people still find it quite hard, but I try to do all the things, you know.
But it's neat. So even using the concept of auditing your time, because you said it twice now, you said even like, how much is my sales team spending talking to these, you know, non-fit customers, or, you know, whatever it is, like, is that one of the ways for somebody to self-audit their alignment to strategy, is by actually just like saying, okay, these are what the things we're supposed to be doing, these things we say we're not doing. Let's just ask people how they're spending their week and see if there's a misalignment.
Oh, this is just a personal like vendetta of mine. So sorry, it's literally just bleeding.
But it's so simple, but I can see how that's so powerful.
We run a meeting now every week, and it's a life changer for me anyway, because I'm just a bit of a geek. And at the end of each week, we just assess, and it's mainly for me because I'm mainly like the person out having these meetings. It's like, what did we expect to come from the week that we just executed? And it's very much connecting meetings, favors, pay it forward, intros, some prospects, but obviously lots of those come through all the good stuff you've done for a few years, hopefully. But we do an audit of what did we expect to get from this week and what did we actually get from it and what can we learn? And then we look at the next 2 weeks forward and say, what should we cancel? Like, should we cancel some of these meetings?
Calendar map to...
Is this actually what we want to as a team? This is where we want to deploy our unbelievably limited resource of time. People fight over like budget all the time, but they never assess. So like, how much do you see a big scaling tech company doing a like budget assessment of marketing or sales versus how much do they sit and take 20 salespeople and assess what are we doing? I don't know. It's just a personal, I don't know, ranting about opportunity cost is one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just such a simple idea of just like looking forward 2 weeks from that feedback and saying, hey, maybe we should cancel these meetings or not take this trip, or, you know, it's tough because I mean, sometimes it's sunk cost, some of it's commitments you've made, but I mean, that's where you're probably going to make the gains on like freeing up the resources to be able to then deploy it to the things that are working.
Yeah, because I kind of think it doesn't matter how much you say, oh yeah, we do that. Oh yeah, we do that. We do that in this monthly, you know, review of like, it isn't the reality because people just don't, it's just not how we're conditioned. We all back our own, you know, but I've got these 5 meetings in and they're brilliant and it's definitely worth my time to go to, you know, Hong Kong for those. I just think that unless it becomes part of the culture, I guess it's kind of, you know, the Ray Dalio, like extreme transparency. If you can try to make that part of a principle of how you operate and you can say, look, I know.
Like getting that feedback?
Yeah. And I think so the team feel they can say, why are you going to that?
That's tough.
And lots of people say they do it. And then you're kind of like, you go in as a consultant.
They might ask, but nobody's saying anything.
You're like, what do you think of the CEO and how and they're like.
Do you have to tell them it's like off the record or are they pretty...
I find wine helps greatly.
Yeah,
it's a great
like, hey,
it's like, what are you into? Oh, Pinot Noir. Let's go have a glass.
Yeah.
But no, I find, you can find a way to say it in the right, so it lands in the right way. But obviously it is difficult.
And working out, obviously we're joking about lunges and stuff. Why is that important to you? Because you mentioned you do it with your team. Like, is that something that you feel adds to the team structure? I know it's always been a big part of my stuff, but like, how do you see that, Carrie?
I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? Everyone that I've ever hired who's been awesome has had some kind of sport
background.
And like, I was into horses when I was younger at quite a senior level. And I think that like ingrained discipline, I mean, God, the D word, discipline, it always comes out. But it's like, there is something about like, obviously when you wake up in the morning, like today, you guys were up super early, like 5:50 alarm goes off, you're in Dublin, it's raining, it's really dark. The last thing, like something, you know, I didn't really want to get up and go and like hit the gym. But I think it's like, it just comes down to that mental resilience. And I know personally, I mean, I know everyone's different, but like for me, if I don't do that, I feel like every day just slowly slips away from me. Whereas if I can try to do that, then it keeps me a little bit sane, especially with lots of travel.
So like the mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just like mental clarity, mental toughness for you, especially because you were Utah, New York, now we're in Dublin, you're from London. Like that's a lot of time zones. So for you, the working out is almost like more mental than physical?
Yeah,
how do you see that?
Well, when I was at Mars, I was like super overweight and I just didn't take health seriously at all. I mean, you end up at these dinners and then like, as you guys know, I mean, you go like people are always, it's always a dinner, then there's always drinks and it's like, you just can't, I mean, and to a certain extent, you kind of can't say no to it because it's part of the business culture. So yeah, I just think I learned from my mistakes maybe.
And what about like the way as a leader, you know, doing those kind of things and then the rest of the team, like, do you think that it's important for the CEO or founder to kind of lead through example, especially on the like personal responsibility?
Yeah, I try to say to the team all the time, like, it's things like being output driven. Like, don't sit at your desk for 5 hours on a Friday if you're absolutely knackered and it's the last thing you want to do and your brain's going in 20 directions. I know myself on a Friday, I'm not like particularly efficient, but I can go home early, maybe hit the gym or do something that's quite personal, you know, and then on a Sunday I can maybe do 1 hour and I can crack through all the things that I was not. So I say to the team all the time, like, don't
force it.
Yeah, and just play to your advantage, right? Know yourself, play to your advantage. If you wake up and you're really not in the mood, nothing's super urgent, know that. But obviously you've got to balance that. And we have had struggles with people who have said, but you said that, so I just, you know, didn't deliver what I said I would by Friday. And we tried, look at your face.
Yeah, I'm like...
And we try to kind of be like, yeah, but we said that in the context of, you know, efficiency and working. Like, the last thing I want is someone sitting there thinking I have to stay till 7 because Carrie's still there. Because like sometimes you're just in the zone. And then if you can get through half the things that you were going to have to do tomorrow because you're in the zone on a Thursday night,
keep running with
why would you not do that? But yeah, it's really tough because I think you get things get misinterpreted. Lots of people say to me all the time, but you've got so much energy and I don't have that energy. So it's a standard I can't uphold. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying you need to be this way. Be yourself.
Yeah.
But you say that, but I think it's quite hard for people. I think people still believe that you want them just to be a mini you. And yeah, I spend a lot of time being like, no, I want you to leverage your strengths.
Yeah.
If we're all like me, it's the one-legged duck that swims in the circle, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that sometimes. So
I like that you allow them to kind of discover who they are and play to that strength, because it's true, everybody's different. I don't want anybody to be like me. I just want you to figure out your tempo, your day, your energy flow for the day, and then play against that.
And you have to try really hard all the time. Like for me, I have to, because I'm, I like outward energy and I get energy from other people being that way. So I have to try all the time to be like, oh, even though you're saying you can be yourself and leverage your own strengths, your behavior is such that you're kind of saying you want everyone to be like you. So I try really hard to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing that again. Stop that. I've had a coach for a long time, and like now I have an Olympic rower as my coach. He's amazing. So I'm a big fan of, I've got my team coaching. Like I'm a big fan of kind of, even if you're aware of something, like we were saying, you can be aware of something, but then every day catching yourself and being like, oh, I'm doing that again.
God,
that must be really annoying for people.
You mentioned that you have coaching for your team. How does that work? Or how do you incorporate your coach and the things he's teaching you? Because I know that Shopify, they were big in the early days of having essentially a whole leadership development team, like a team of coaches for their executive leadership team.
Awesome,
yeah. And it's like probably a big reason why they've been so successful. How do you bring coaching into your employee interactions?
So I probably haven't got it right. I think people is definitely a really big challenge. You
got 60 clients you've worked with.
Yeah.
And how big is the team?
So really small. So we're kind of 3-4 client facing, but then we use lots of so we have a data guy, we have a project management resource, we have HR resource. So we pull people in, but we obviously want to scale, but I also want to make sure we've got the base right, because otherwise I feel it's just spinning off. But we've worked with, obviously some amazing clients. And I think I have bought, paid for coaching from the company, paid for coaching for people. I've also I try to make sure that I have a one-on-one with everyone on the team probably every couple of weeks that's just personal. It's like no functional, no what have you done?
No projects, no,
literally
just open
like,
space.
how are you feeling?
Create the space,
Like, what do you think's going well at the moment? What's not? How can I
Is there any interesting kind of anecdotes around those one-on-ones that really gave you insights on how powerful they were? Yeah,
I think there's things, I've definitely learned, I guess it's probably useful for people watching who have my kind of personality, which is slightly intense. I've definitely learned to kind of manage the silence a lot more. I think I'm quite excitable. So I get kind of like, oh my God, we could do I'm kind of a Rottweiler puppy maybe. There's definitely a puppiness, but there's also a fierceness going on. But so I try to really shut up, structure the one-on-one questions in an open way and send them before, because a lot of my team are more introverted, so don't think they can think on their feet just because I like that. It's obviously complete opposite for some people. And then, I quite often say, if there was one thing I could do differently, if there was one thing you'd like more of. So trying to not just say, how are you feeling at the moment?
Yeah.
Are you happy? That's just a ridiculous question. I guess try to use some of the techniques we use in our questioning with clients, but to angle them internally. And quite often I've had quite a few people be like, I feel like I've just had an hour of therapy. So I think I must be doing something right. Although it's really quite weird to have therapy with a Rottweiler puppy, but let's just go with it.
But if you calm down, it's good. It's being self-aware of saying, hey, I know that, if I need to create the space for them to feel comfortable enough to give me the answer, and I got to just listen, because I don't know, I'm the same way. I don't mind filling in white, and then the conversation doesn't happen. I never realized how important that was that you said that, sending the question in advance, because I'm very much I can just talk, off the top of my head, but you're right. Some people are like, oh, I forgot to ask you this, or I meant to say this,
And also I think reflective is just completely different personalities, right? The introvert versus extrovert, detail versus not. And I think the more you learn about the way you are and your preferences, it just gives you more of an edge in, every area. It's like when people say, oh, I'm going to pitch. We do a lot in private equity and with some VCs, but the larger and more open-minded, I'd say.
Yeah.
But a lot more in private equity. And people often moan about the way those meetings run. And it's kind of like, but think of that as a personality style. Like, if you don't know your numbers off by heart, when I was at Mars, I presented to Tesco once and I didn't know my numbers off by heart. They were like, what's the market going at? Didn't know them. And I remember my boss kind of saying, well, you kind of let us down, didn't you? And she said it in a nice way.
Yeah.
But I was really upset.
But you got the message.
From then on, I learned the Excel every time, and almost too much, that I'd be like, well, that market's growing at 7.8% and we're actually going at 9.3%. So we're growing and shifting the market for you, Tesco, and you're behind. And and it's similar with investors. It's like, but I'm not a numbers person, or I don't really like that, or that's why I have my co-founder. No, not okay. You're CEO of the company. And often people don't just say, they're just not direct about that. And I think it's similar with your team internally. You obviously want to be caring and understanding, but also sometimes you have to say, I've definitely encouraged people to leave because I'm like, do something you love. You have to work in something that you think, I would do this for free. Like, I would do a pricing or an internationalization project like for free because I'm a geek and I think it's fascinating and really super interesting. And if you really think it's the kind of roll your eyes, just like go find the thing that wouldn't be that. Even though it's gutting.
Even though you're going to lose them?
Yeah, because it's gutting. But like, if that's not, I think they should be fulfilled. But yeah, maybe it's a bit of a kind of utopian view. It's
probably
why I have a small team. I'm like, go find the thing you love.
Yeah,
Carrie,
you're
stop doing
awesome,
that.
but you need to go do the thing you lights up even more. When should a company think of like bringing in somebody to help them with strategy? Because a lot of, if you're at $1 million in revenue, you kind of feel like you've got enough things you got to figure out. Like it's clear, but and I love that you said private equity because I can clearly see the alignment there where they're at scale trying to assess different companies and opportunities and stuff. But how should a CEO and founder, because that's predominantly my audience, how should they think about bringing in somebody like yourself to help them with these things?
So I think we always say, and like we said it earlier, in every session we run, we always say, but if you can get the data, so if layer one, always do yourself. Someone like me will definitely ping you. Like I ping so many people like, oh, if you're a 1 million ARR and you're really thinking about your pricing, here's a spreadsheet to get someone to fill in. Go do these 10 slides and assess it. Don't hire a consultant. Personal view.
Okay.
I think there comes a point where you're scaling, you've got so many things on the list, that this is a big thing that's maybe I call it frogging, because there's this thing called eat the frog. It's like you've put it in the corner and it's become this Godzilla
Brian
frog.
Tracy, eat the frog.
Got to chunk it down and get chewing on that frog.
Frogging, you call it frogging.
Of course.
Okay.
So if you're frogging it, and if you're kind of putting it in the corner and letting it just become this beastly thing, then I would say it depends how important it is. Is it on the scale? Are you frogging it because it doesn't really matter, or is it actually really important and this could be a game changer? In which case, I think most of the time, I think it's a mindset shift with consulting, because I don't think you're hiring someone smarter than you. I don't think you're hiring someone who's going to do this completely differently to you. I think most of the time you're hiring someone who's going to deliver to a process and get it done in 8 weeks.
That's a bandwidth thing.
And they're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And they are going to, in my case, it's my baby. If I don't make this happen and I don't delight you, it is going to hurt my company. You don't have to hire someone. You don't have to go and risk the fact you've hired the wrong person. Then they want to be onboarded. It's like, look, point and shoot. I want this answered. Yeah. I want this answered in 12 weeks. I think you're relatively smart. I'm sure my team internally could probably answer it.
But I don't want to take up their time.
Yeah. Opportunity cost is too great. You've got experience, go. And then I think you do bring perspective. You bring the fact you make it happen, and you bring the fact that you've got energy, and you hopefully work as a team, all these good things. But I think if you're sitting there and you're thinking, you're drowning, there's so much, there's this big thing that I've got to tackle, and for me to pull together a project team, to get someone to own it, to do all of this, actually, what is 80K? What is 200K? What is that amount of money if the opportunity cost is everyone's time for 4 weeks and a load of, moaning about priorities? And there comes a point in the company's growth cycle where I think it's worth taking that jump.
Yeah.
But until it is, ping me and I'll send you all of our processes. Like I'm super open on all of that.
I'd rather get you some wins, get yourself further along when you're
ready.
For
the long term, if you do loads of favors and you pay it forward, I think those people, they'll either come to you or they'll send someone to you and say, oh, they were really helpful. So that's why we do a lot of stuff for earlier stage companies, because we're not targeting them, but we want to be helpful. And we send them kind of, oh, here's an Excel you could fill in, or you could just take this, or maybe the question you need to think about these 3. And we always, I guess we've made friends that way. So
that's a good way to do it.
It's a bit more American than British though.
Yeah, no, it's actually really interesting. What have you noticed about the difference between the British and the American way of doing business? Because I know even building sales team and selling to British or even Europe versus the US, like you cannot be like if you try to ask for a credit card on a first conversation, they're like, ooh, wait, I don't like this at all. Like, don't do that to me.
You're so transactional.
Yeah, like, who are you?
Stop it.
And then Americans, they're like, just take my card, let's do this. So what have you learned around even helping your clients like internationalize or like what are some of the things that people need to be prepared, especially most of my audience probably US, the ones that are coming into Europe, what do they need to look out for?
So I think it kind of goes both ways. We do a lot of work with US companies, to be honest, because I think our ethos is just a very good fit with like demanding, challenging, results orientation, speed, but without don't relent on quality. Speed and quality should be able to be achieved at the same time. I think for sales particularly, the whole cultural nuances, the way that people in Europe and the UK, I think, want the dance. They want a dance.
They want to dance.
Yeah. And sadly, they kind of also, there's a little bit, and we kind of have this, bracket in our CRM for people that are not Cruxy, who we're not trying to sell to. Because if they say anything like, I've got a hole in my business and the question is, can you fill that hole? We're just like, A, that's really dodgy. B, like, no, we don't want to. We don't, you're not the kind of person. So I think from our viewpoint, and all of our US clients would be similar, it's like, we're in it together. Let's make this happen. We're both vested, small company, they're scaling hugely. How do we make this happen? Very direct conversations. I'm probably not the best person to talk about selling to British people because all of our clients are not really in the UK. Yeah. But I think
have you helped them come to the British, have you helped them US companies come over here?
A couple we've looked at investigating the market, and a couple we're literally doing projects just in the US, like a pricing strategy project that's just about them in the US. Yeah. But I think in the UK, they want the dance. In Europe, it's completely different. I mean, France, you could take someone for lunch for 3 hours and then kind of finally over the espresso talk about the problem. Kind of so nuanced and so different. But I think in the UK, you can be more direct, but I think it's talking, and we have interviewed lots of banks and lots of insurance companies, lots of big enterprises, and they always say that actually what they do want is more vision. So they usually talk down on the approach of some tech companies, saying they come in with their clunky product set, flogging me the what. And what I want is someone to talk to me about my problems and to challenge. And I was with a few hedge funds last week, and they were all saying, no one comes in and says, let me talk to you about your trade workflow. How does this operate? What are you automating? Why? Where are you generating alpha through your data? These are super complicated things, but if you go in and you're curious, you might not do your 20-minute demo and them kind of go, but they're never going to buy from a demo in the first meeting anyway. So accept that and go in and be really curious, especially if it's a big sale, big ticket item. Whereas I still think in the UK, they're quite naive. I mean, I just don't think people talk about how in the US, you have to stand up in class and kind of sell yourself in when you're 7.
Yeah.
Stand up and sell yourself.
Yeah.
And in the UK,
all those pageants.
In the UK, it would be never do that. No. That is really embarrassing. You've just let down your whole family. Yeah. And I say that as someone who basically, I don't think in ethos, I'm not very like that. But yeah, you definitely get these kind of dodgy looks. Someone said to me the other day, gosh, you're the most salesy person I've ever met. And I was like, God, I never, I really don't think of myself in that way. Or? Obviously not. I'm British. Yeah. But then I kind of thought, well, actually, I'm always trying to help people and do favors and connect the dots. So maybe they meant it. I kind of took it. I just tried to block it from my mind and then take it in the way I wanted. But maybe they didn't mean it in that way.
Well, we get to decide.
You do.
The relationship side seems to be a big part of the way you've mentioned a few times how you like to pay it forward. And if you do good stuff in the world, it comes back. How do you see that in regards to how you look at your time, your schedule? How do you invest in relationships? What's your approach to that?
It's definitely one of the things I find really hard, because I think, I don't know, I just believe that eventually something will come off. So there's a lot of people who I've spent a lot of time and energy getting to know and becoming friends. And I actually genuinely have done it because they're nice people and you want to do it. But you do obviously have to balance that. Now I try to kind of just say, look, if you're not having breakfast or drinks or something, maybe 2-3 times a week. And then every meeting I go to, I try to do 3 favors. And
Per person you meet?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm like, right, how can I help them? Oh, they're looking to hire and there's someone I know who's really good at that. Or, oh, they're really interested in selling to banks and they want to meet, I don't know, HSBC, and I happen to know someone there. Or I try to just make sure that I do that, because as soon as, when I don't have that kind of equation in my head, because I'm obviously a slightly binary, I find it really difficult and it just runs away with me. And then I'm like, oh, I've promised all these intros and I've not done them, which, you know, promising something and not delivering.
Okay.
Is there anything worse in life?
Yeah, it feels horrible.
Yeah, it's that. Like, you're like, oh my God, I found a note from 2 years ago. So I'm trying to do that all the time. I mean, I'm sure there's some.
And you said 2 or 3 meals a week. You try to meet with somebody
Or
else.
like a drink, a breakfast, something. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that something that you proactively reach out to schedule, or you just accept more inbound, or?
No, proactively.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a specific, like, is it part of a strategy, or is it just like whoever comes? Because like I used to be more like, build the spreadsheet. Who are the people I need to know in my industry? Organize dinners, et cetera. And then I started kind of being more, like whoever comes to mind. Like I almost like it, like when my mind's like, what's that person? I need to add them to the list, right? Next time I'm in New York, I want to have meals. Because I feel like the universe speaks to me a little that way. So I want to run with it.
Steady.
But yeah. But what is your like approach to, is it biz dev? Is it relationship building?
I think that's the hard thing, because what bucket do you put it in? Like, I don't do it for biz dev. I'm not doing it thinking, oh, there's going to be a deal here.
You're just adding value.
It's a combination of like, I really like you. I think there is, now that Cruxy's a bit older, I think now I have this like innate filter, because I'm like, people that buy from us are like very open-minded, very challenging, quite brutal, very direct people who demand a 9 out of 10. They've probably hired all the consultants in previous lives, and they have some kind of energy connection in that ethos sense with what I'm trying to do. So they're like that. They then are quite open-minded in that they're not people who are just saying, oh, I'm just going to hire a big name because it will pacify my board. They've got that like challenger edge, I guess.
Yeah. And
then I know the industries in which they're in. So everyone that I like and enjoy spending time with is kind of almost like the natural filter.
So just automatically.
So yeah, if you think, do I really want to do this? I guess it's a bit like in your personal life. You kind of have all these friends from university or something, and you're like, oh my God, I've gone for lunch with someone and now I feel really drained. Maybe I shouldn't see them that much anymore, And you have all this heritage where you think, I should do that because I should.
Yeah.
And then you start to kind of realize when you get older that you don't actually need to do that at all. You can just spend time with the people you really like.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I'm just a great believer that if you spend time with people you have that connection with, like when we walked in the room, big hug, like loads of energy, good banter, lots of bounce, like we'll stay in touch, we'll do each other favors, we'll probably win clients through each other. Awesome. But like, how do you ever define that?
Yeah, it's not a forced thing. It's either you like somebody and you want to see them do well and you help them out, or you don't and you just don't follow up. Don't
or you don't, and then you're kind of like, oh God, I feel really bad, but I shouldn't commit to anything for you.
That's the hard part. Is I know that I've in the early days, I just you read the book you mentioned earlier, like Dale Carnegie or Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone, and it's just like it gets exhaustive, and then it's to what you just said, the filter of just do it for people that you feel compelled to want to do it for, not just everybody, because it's like some checklist. Again, I'm a software guy, so it's kind of more kind of systematized. But when it comes to growing what you're doing now, how do you think of, taking your associates, like, and doubling the size? Is it choosing to do less in what you're doing now, maybe more, like, because I think the private equity sounds fascinating because they've got money and they need a lot of this kind of stuff. Is it to grow just broader? What's your growth strategy for the next,
So I want us to stay really distinctive in tech and fintech and the more complex end of that.
Yeah.
I don't think we're, that's where we've built up expertise. And I mean, I say expertise, it's like, but we've got market insight in that area. It's something that we enjoy. We kind of find it fascinating to get under the skin of these businesses. So I think we should stay very focused in that way. I think what we offer should stay also very focused around pricing strategy and new markets, new segments, new verticals, because in essence, they're very similar. It's like dig into where the value sits, assess using quantitative and qualitative techniques, what that means, and then build an action plan to deliver. So I think in that way, we should stay very focused. I think it's all around the team. So I spoke earlier about challenges, and I think I need to find, I've got a couple of people who are just, I mean, I don't even know how they exist as human beings. They're absolutely
That's
outstanding.
great.
And I'm not willing at this stage and size, we sell the people we are, right? So if I bring someone on who's not quite an ethos fit.
We sell the people we are. Got it.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
no, it makes
consulting.
sense.
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
like the fact it is because I'd love to, embed tech at some point. But
yeah.
right now,
That's-
the energy with which you walk in the room, where you articulate something that you've got to kind of get that person to buy into the fact you can help them with something that they currently believe
You want
they
that
might do
team
internally.
to deliver on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's all about the team. So I want to take us double revenue next year. We should get close to $1 million revenue this year. So, looking to 2020, want to really step that up. And through people who have the right ethos, but also are smart and able to get shit done. I think there's not many of those in the world, as far as I can tell.
The fact that you sold the sports car, moved into your parents to start the business tells me a lot about who you are. And I think that's fascinating. As you look back on your journey, who did you need to become to be the CEO that's leading the company today?
Oh, I'm not sure I am yet. I think it's a lifelong
changed
journey.
from 6 years ago or 5 years ago to now? Like what are those lessons, or what are those, who did you need to become to get to this point?
I mean, it doesn't matter what anyone says to you about, my company's obviously really small. I just think when you meet other founders and you look them in the eyes and you can see the pain that they've been through, and like you go to these dinners, and I'm sure you go to them as well, and people sit there, and maybe I'm just invited because I'm a woman, I'm a small company, but you go to them and you kind of have this connection with people, and you're just like, but it's so brutal, but it's so glorious. And that's this guy, Hugh McLeod, who does Gaping Void.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I love all of his stuff. And when I first started the company,
Old school.
when I first started the company, I sent him an email just saying this is amazing. And he replied, and I was just like, so did Seth Godin as well. And I just thought, oh my God, these people are so amazing. And yeah, he has this thing, and it's like, mediocrity sucks. And I love all of his ethos that's brought out obviously through his cartoons. Yeah. But this kind of, it's so brutal and so glorious. There's no other way to describe it. So now I don't feel the highs and I don't feel the lows that I used to. Mm-hmm. I think I've definitely become someone that's kind of like, oh, we've had this amazing win. That's something I never thought was humanly possible, and I should be delighted. And I'm really happy, and it's good, a bit Jocko-like, good.
Yeah.
But then if something really awful happens, it's like, no one's died. It's fine. Worse things will come. No one's died. And I think that as someone with lots of energy for life,
yeah, you can
kind of
spin up or spin
have
down.
to become a little bit more. And I think I've always been quite resilient, but I think I've definitely become a lot more resilient. Like people have left who I've kind of thought wouldn't. I've cried in like a toilet at an event for 3 hours just having a panic attack, thinking I can't do this. Like everything awful and everything wonderful has happened rolled into one. And I think that you just have to, it just makes you stronger than you ever thought, but not in a cheesy way. Don't get me wrong, I'm still crying most days. Not quite literally, don't worry. But you just have these wobbles, and then you're kind of like, come on, you can get through this. And I think, maybe it's just the voices in your head change, or you change the way that you take them on. But I think it's just the most insane thing. It's indescribable.
It's pretty cool.
Isn't it? It's just indescribable.
Yeah.
And you try to explain it to people, and they're like, sorry, I'm doing a really bad job of explaining this to you, but I kind of don't know how to explain how some days you feel completely on the brink of breakdown, and other days and then suddenly you go into this flow where you kind of mellow, and you're like, oh yeah, everything's kind of going wrong, but
it's all good.
We live to fight another day.
It can all happen in the same week. The highs and lows.
Yeah, it's so bad. 1 hour.
Yeah, it's like the world's falling apart. This is the best day ever.
And you're like, come on, we can do this. And then you go to the toilet, have a cry, come back. Like, it's but yeah, I don't know. I just don't think many people talk about it like that. I think especially like the mental health, and not mental health. I know that's kind of like a trendy thing people say now, but I mean more of the kind of just literally the anxiety, the resilience, the way that you have to just keep fighting. And obviously like you have days where you just think, oh my God, I want a duvet day. I want a duvet day. But you just get up, hit the lunges.
Show up. Yeah, hit the lunges, the banded lunges. I don't know how you do that.
The banded lunges. Apparently you're keen to take it on. So,
I'm going to get some bands.
I'm gonna send you some.
Carrie, how do people find you online? LinkedIn?
So cruxy.co.uk. Yeah. I'm on Twitter at Carrie_loves_. Don't ask, it was ages ago. And on LinkedIn, Carrie Osman would obviously be awesome to connect to people. I mean, I think, pay it forward, and all of that ethos rings true for people that you know and those you don't. So I just actually agreed. Someone said, I went to the same university as you and I'm thinking about getting into consulting. And I was like, yeah, of course, like let's do a call. So all that stuff, you've got to keep doing it, right?
It's amazing. Carrie, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
You're a legend.
Thanks for watching this episode of Escape Velocity. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with your biggest insight from our conversation. Be sure to check out the next episode.